Hey friends, it's Simon Hurley and welcome to another video. Today we're going to be jumping into some lunar paste techniques, and more specifically we're going to take a look at the paste tool set. I love this set and I thought I would do a devoted video on it because there are so many techniques you can use these tools for. Also, linked down below is a full supplies list to everything I used, and using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Now without further ado, let's get into the video. Alright, so inside the paste tool set you get a palette knife. I really love this small kind of triangle pointed shape because it helps you get into some of the smaller details and scoop the paste out of the jar. And then you also get these large scrapers. And what I really love about these is they're big enough for a card front to go all the way across, and then you can scrape the paste down and really easily smooth it out. And you can also use the scraper for some cool blend and mixing techniques, which I'll share later in the video. You might have already seen both of these tools before, but I thought that combining them in one tool set was really important because you really can't use the scraper without the palette knife to scoop your paste out of the jar first. So I thought that it was important to have every tool you might need for lunar paste in one package. Alright, so let's start off with the basics and really explain how to use the tool set in depth before we get into some of the fancier techniques. So I'm going to use this new warped circle stencil. I love this one, and it's going to look like bubbles on today's card. And I'm going to do sort of a tone-on-tone effect using a piece of mid-tone blue cardstock. So I'm starting off with a little bit of mint tape. I want to tape my cardstock down to the surface first to hold it down. And this is just important so that the paper doesn't shift underneath your stencil as you're stenciling. Then we'll lay my stencil down on top, positioning the design however we want it. And then I'll go in again using mint tape, and I'm going to tape the stencil down to the surface to again make sure that it doesn't shift during the process. I love this mint tape because it's just tacky enough, but in case you tape it onto your cardstock, it's also not going to rip your cardstock. So this is one of my favorite tapes for things like this. Once we've got everything taped down, we can then go in using a little bit of lunar paste. Here I'm going to go in using some No Diving, which is a brand new color. I love this sort of mid-tone blue. It's really beautiful. And I'm going to go in here starting off using my palette knife, and I'm just going to apply the paste really quite thick at the bottom of the stencil here. Now we don't need to worry about applying too much of the paste or really savoring it. You want to go in and apply quite a bit, and this is going to help as you spread it across the surface. So we'll bring in the scraper tool, and what you're going to do is start at the bottom here, and then we can sort of pull it across and gently swipe all the way across. Now, if you didn't get into some of the gaps, that's totally okay. Notice how we still have some on our stencil tool. So now we can go in and go to the different areas and just make sure that it gets filled in. Now, if you're swiping over top and you're still having a hard time getting it in the grooves, what you might want to do is kind of, instead of tilting it upward like this, tilt the paste tool down. That way the paste on this edge is going to apply to the surface and sort of fill in those gaps. That's really the trick to this, is sort of tilting it down like this so that the excess paste gets into these areas. So again, tilt it just to make sure that all the areas are filled in. All right, super easy. Then you'll notice that it's quite covered over top of the stencil. Now we want to even it out and remove some of the paste. So to do that, keep it at more of an upward angle like this, and then swipe it across the surface. Now we dipped in a little bit on those areas, so we can apply a little bit more paste down. And then again, just gently scrape across the surface to smooth and even it out. Now this is why I wanted to do a video on this, because once you get the angles right, if you want to apply more paste, you kind of tilt it at this sort of angle, and then if you want to scrape it off, you tilt it at an upward angle. That's why I wanted to do this video, so you really understood how to use the tool and how to get the best result with it. Now this is why I said don't worry about using too much, because now we can go in, scrape any of the excess paste off of our scraper tool, and we can put it all right back into the jar. So there's no waste once you're done, but having enough on the surface helps you scrape it across really evenly in just a few tries. And when it comes to lunar paste, you want to clean everything pretty quickly, so I'll just go in and clean off the tool set, just using a little bit of paper towel, and if you apply a little bit of water too, it makes them really easy to clean before they dry. Alright, then I'm going to go in and gently lift this off the surface, and you can see that it's got a nice crisp edge and none of the lunar paste leaked underneath the stencil. Lunar pastes are really formulated just to be the perfect consistency, not too thick where it's hard to spread, but not too thin where it goes underneath the edge like that. If it does go underneath the stencil, you might want to use a little bit of pixie spray to sort of hold it down in place, but I don't find that's too necessary. One thing I love about lunar paste is that they're pretty heat stable, so I'm going to go in here using my heat tool and just heat this up so that it dries a little bit quicker. This way it only takes a couple of minutes to dry, but if you leave it to dry on its own, it could take about 30 minutes to an hour before it's completely dry since we applied it pretty thick. And once it's completely dry, all of that shine really comes to life. I love how this background looks. It totally looks like under the sea bubbles. And what I love about lunar paste is once it's dry, none of it is coming off on your hands, but it still has all of that amazing and intense shine. To go along with the sea theme of this card, I thought that I would use the Mermaid Maker stencil next. And in this stencil, I actually cut out this pattern so that we can do some layering with it, which I'll show you in just 1 second. So for the stenciling, I thought that I would start out using a little bit of Prom Queen ink, and I'm going in with my domed foam blending tool. Now you can tape off the areas that you don't want ink, but I'll just be careful around the edges. And I'm just going to start off by inking up this first mermaid tail. So just go in and apply a little bit of ink all throughout here. And if you want to, you can make some areas a little bit darker to add some shading and dimension to the image. So once that's complete, we can lift it off and you've already got your mermaid tail started. Now for this, I want to do a bit of layering, so I'm going to lay down this piece of the stencil, which is that scale pattern. And we're just going to go in here and tape off the edge using a little bit of mint tape. And I'm also going to tape off the part where it starts to go into its tail. I'm going to add a little bit of tape there so that it just does the body of the mermaid with the texture. Then I'll bring back in the mermaid stencil right on top, so we're just layering this right on top of it, and then we can add a little bit of tape to hold it right in place. Now what's awesome is that the inks and lunar pastes match, so this matches the Prom Queen ink, so I'm going to use a little bit of Prom Queen right over top. So we're just going to grab a little bit of lunar paste, a little bit goes a long way, and in this instance I'm just going in using the palette knife since it's a pretty small area. And we can just go right over top and add some lunar paste. And if I need to, go right back into the jar and just spread it over top of the surface of these scales. And then again, just smooth it out over top. And we don't need the scraper for this since it's such a small area. And we'll lift that right off the surface. So super easy. And now we have those scales on that fun mermaid tail. And once that's all dry, check out the gorgeous shine that's on that tail. I love it. Now there's another little piece for the tail to add some more texture, and for this one, I'm going to lay it down, and I'm just going to go back in using that same Prom Queen ink, and I'm going to ink blend over top again using the domed foam blending tool. Now when it comes to doing ink blending, I'm using the exact same color, and when you layer these translucent dye-based inks on top of each other, it'll actually get darker on the second layer. And so then we can still have some different color variation, even though we use the same exact color ink pad. So it's super cool. Now I don't want to overwhelm the card with too much shine, so for this next tail, I'm going to go in using just a little bit of Crown Me ink. We'll tap off to the side to get just a slightly lighter color and go in and blend our first layer over top of the tail using just the ink. Now for the second layer, we're going to do the exact same technique by placing this scale stencil down, and then we'll also tape it off right when it hits that tail area so that we don't get blending over there. But then this time, instead of going in using lunar paste, we'll just line this back up and we'll go back in using a little bit more ink. This time we're going to go in with the full intensity of the ink pad and we'll layer it over top again to get a slightly darker color, to give some color variation even though we're using the exact same color ink. And when we lift that off, check out those beautiful scales on there. Then for the tail, we'll lay the texture right over top and just go in with full intensity of ink again to apply that texture right onto the tail. All right, now there are no dies for this set, so I'm just gonna go in using my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors and fussy cut these images out. And to do this, I'm just gonna leave a little bit of a white border all around the images. And they're really simple shapes, so they're really easy to just follow along and cut out super smooth. Now, if you struggle with fussy cutting a little bit, I super recommend these scissors. They're Fiskars Spring Assist scissors, so they spring back out at you so your hands don't get tired. And I find that it also gives you a little bit of a smoother line since you're not doing the action of opening your scissors, which can help to make the process a lot smoother and easier. All right, to put this card together, we're adding a little bit of tape runner to the back of this background. And then I'll adhere it down to my top folding card base. I'll adhere the small mermaid tail down right to the card and I'll apply it a little bit further back to make it look like it's in the distance. For the larger tail, I'll apply foam tape for some dimension, and then I'm going to apply it a little bit further forward and pop it down onto the card. I'm going way back into my collection for this one to one of the first stamps that I've created, and I'm gonna use the sentiment that says, "You're mermazing." I'm gonna do some heat embossing on that same blue cardstock, so I'll use some anti-static powder tool to make sure no powder sticks where we don't want it. And then I'm going in using a little bit of VersaFine clear sticky ink to stamp down the sentiment right onto the surface. And I want a nice bold contrast, so I'm embossing it with some white heat embossing powder. I'll tap off the excess. And I also find lightly blowing on the surface helps to get rid of any excess flecks. Then I'll heat set this until it's nice and bright white. Here's a look at the finished card. I absolutely love how it turned out with all of that beautiful shine in the background, learning how to smooth out that paste really nicely, and then finishing it off with those super fun mermaid tails. And the shine on this card is just out of this world. All right, next I want to show you how to create some really beautiful color blends as you're doing your stenciling. So I'm going to go in here using the geometry stencil. Now I haven't used this one in a long time, but I just am obsessed with these beautiful kind of geometric patterns. I think they're great. So we're going to use this for our background. And again, the first step is just going to be to take a little bit of mint tape, loop it, and then tape our piece of cardstock right down to our work surface to make sure that nothing shifts. All right, then I'll position the geometry stencil how I want it, and it's kind of important to get this one lined up since it's got some kind of straight lines throughout. And then I'll go in using some mint tape and tape down the background to hold the stencil in place. Then I want to create a nice rainbow blend, so I'm starting off using a little bit of bee sting. I'm low on this one, so I got to replenish this jar. So I'll grab a little bit of paste and I'll just apply, again, kind of a glob at the bottom of the stencil here. And I'll wipe off the palette knife in between colors to make sure we don't contaminate anything. Then I'll go in using Guppy, which is kind of a newer color. I love this kind of bright orange. Now with this, you want to use a little bit less, like you don't want to go all out like we did last time because you can't really use the excess except for using it on an extra project. So do a little bit less on this one. Then I'll go in using Shooting Star, which is that really bright yellow color on the line. Then I'll bring in Later Gator, and we're getting kind of low on room here, so I gotta be careful with what I add. A little bit of Note Diving. And last but not least, everyone's new favorite purple, which is called Crown Me. I love this gorgeous, rich, and vibrant purple color. All right, so now that we've got our globs of color with our palette knife, we're ready to go in using our scraper. So I'm gonna go in with the scraper tool, again, start right at the bottom here, and then scrape it all the way up the surface. Now that went pretty far. Now there's a couple little areas here where we wanna go back in, so I can just go in and apply more paste. Again, do it at more of this downwards angle. So you're going to be able to apply more paste to the surface rather than scraping it off right away. All right, once we've got everything covered like this, we're going to then go in kind of a more upward motion and scrape it off the surface to smooth everything out. And you'll see that as we do several passes with this blend, it sort of starts to blend together since we're moving the scraper just a little bit in those areas. So you get this beautiful blend of colors. Now there's more on the scraper, so we'll set it off to the side. We'll use that in just a second. First, we'll just lift off the tape, and we'll peel the stencil off the surface. And again, you see those really smooth and clean lines, which I love, even with this fine line design. And here is what that beautiful background looks like once it's dry. Check out all of that shine. And I'm just obsessed with the blending that we got. By kind of swiping that several times, you get just such a beautiful blend of colors. Now the cool part about that technique is we still have some excess left on our scraper tool here. Now we can't put this back into the jar since it blended quite a bit. So what I like to do is take an extra piece of cardstock. It could be black or white cardstock. And I'm going to go in starting from the edge, and I'm just going to swipe this all the way across the surface. Now following some of the same techniques that we do with the scraper tool. So if you want to apply more color, just kind of tilt it downwards like this. And if you want to scrape off some more color and make it a little bit smoother, you can go back in and use a little bit more of an upward angle. And you don't want to press too hard, you just want to glide it on there and you'll get a beautiful background like this. And there's still some more on here, so I can go in here and this time I'm going to create kind of a rainbow pattern by just going in and again tilting it downward like this and just swirling it across to create kind of a rainbow angle. And how cool is that? I think that's just so beautiful using some of the excess paste, and you can sort of swirl the tool or create your own shapes or patterns. And once these backgrounds are dry, the shine is just so beautiful. And what's so awesome about these is you almost created your own kind of blended metallic cardstock, which you can't buy blended cardstock like this, but I think it's so cool to use for die cutting or different backgrounds. So that's why I encourage you to kind of swipe those scraps out too, so you can create some really beautiful extra backgrounds. With this background, to make it a little bit less stark, I'm going to go in using the matching ink colors, and I'm just going to lightly blend over top of the surface. Now I'm not going full intensity so that they match exactly. I'm just blending kind of a lighter version of the color right beneath it, but it's still the same tone, so it's gonna match really beautifully with the colors on top. Next, I'll move into Guppy. Ink it up, and if you want to get a lighter color, I find tapping off on the surface on the side is going to kind of help, and then we can blend this right over top. So you can see I'm just following exactly where the colors landed with the Lunar paste. Moving into Shooting Star, I'll blend that right over top of the yellow. And the Lunar paste also isn't going to change at all. Since it's shiny and completely dry, it resists the ink you put on top. Next, I'll go over top Later Gator and blend that one out. Into Note Diving. And what I really love about my ink pads is just how beautifully they blend together. So you can see blending these colors together is just such a breeze. They blend so smoothly and seamlessly into each other. And then lastly, everyone's favorite purple, which is Crown Me. Everyone had been asking for this color in Lunar paste, so now that it's finally here, I think everyone's super excited because it's just such a true and rich purple color. And once that's all ink blended, I love the background. It's just a little bit less stark white, and you can see how nicely they match the ink colors sort of when you tilt it in the light, and then when you untilt it, it gets a little bit darker and it provides a little bit more contrast. Now, unfortunately, I need to chop this background down a little bit, so I'm going to cut it in half, but we can use the other half on another card. To finish off this card, I'm going to use the Sentimental Flowers stamp set. I love this one because it's got lots of detail in each one of these flowers, and they're a really great size. It's also got some perfect sentiments along in here. Now, this is my stamp set. You can see I've really used it and stained it a ton, but a stain stamp is a love stamp, and they still work perfectly. Okay, and then I'm going to stamp down the mid-size flower, and here I'm using a little bit of VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink, so I get a really nice jet black and really crisp image. So I'll stamp this down onto my cardstock, giving it some good pressure. Then I'll also go in and stamp down some of the leaves that we can use to coordinate with the floral. And then because this black ink takes a little bit longer to dry, I'm going to go in using some clear embossing powder and throw it right over the top to help set it in place. And then I'll heat set this until it turns clear and shiny. Alright, then let's color this in, and to do it super simply, I'm going to go in using blending tools and some ink to do it. So I'm going to start off using a little bit of Triple Berry, and I'll just blend this into the center using an Altenew blending brush, and this is one of the smaller ones so you can get into more fine of a detail. And I'll sort of blend that purple out a little bit. And this allows me to go in with several colors. So next I'm going to go in using a little bit of Over the Moon, which is a softer butter yellow color. And I'm going to bring this in and just blend it in slightly using the purple. Now yellow and blue usually make brown if you blend them together, but I find this color combo is really beautiful. So I just don't blend them too much on top of each other, just next to each other, and you get such a gorgeous look. And then to finish it off, I'll bring in a slight hint of blue, clear skies, since we use so many colors on the card. I thought this would finish it off nicely and just touch the edges of the petals with this beautiful blue color, and it'll create sort of a little bit of a green with the yellow and blue. And with this, I'm not worried about going outside the line since we're gonna fussy cut it out anyways. So just color this in however you want. And I think that blend is just gorgeous. It's not a traditional color scheme, but I think it's a ton of fun. For the leaves, again, let's keep it super simple. I'm using a bit of Later Gator on my domed blending foam, and I'm just going to blend over top of the leaves lightly for the first layer here. So just go in with a bit of color. And then to add a bit more dimension, I'm going in using a smaller Detail Altenew blending brush. This one's just a little bit bigger than the last one, and I can just go in right at kind of the base of these leaves and just blend in that same color, but again, layer it up so that it creates a darker look. And like I said, that's a really great way to go in and get more out of your inks by just layering them up a little bit more intense, and you get such a beautiful difference in coloring, which I love. So if you don't have a ton of ink pads, just keep layering up the one and you get a way more bold and rich and intense color. And I love this little detail brush too, because you can really concentrate the color. All right, now I'm gonna go in and just wipe off the top, because you just want to wipe off any excess ink that's sitting on top of the embossing powder. All right, then I'll go in and fussy cut this out, again using my Fiskars Spring Assist scissors. And when I do this, I leave just a little bit of that colored border all the way around the image to make it just a bit easier. And you don't need to be too perfect. Nobody's really inspecting your fussy cutting when they receive a handmade card. And again, same thing for the leaves. We'll just quickly and easily fussy cut these out. I've added my background down to the bottom half of my card. Then I'm going to pop my flower up right in the center on some foam tape. All right, then I'm going to add my leaves down and tuck them right underneath. And I'm just going to add them into little groupings or clusters. So I'll put another leaf next to this one. And then I want kind of a visual triangle too. So I'm going to add one last leaf up top here. And I find that groupings of 3 kind of draw your eye into the card. I love this stamp set because of all the sentiments. And I'm gonna use the clear sheet just to test out my sentiments here. I love the Miss You, but I really think that I'm gonna use Thank You because I use thank you cards so much. So I'll ink up my sentiment, and then I can stamp it right down onto my stark white cardstock. And then again, I'll set it in place using a little bit of clear heat embossing powder, tap off the excess, and heat it until it's clear and shiny. Finish this off, I'll just pop up the sentiment right below the flower. And that finishes off the card really beautifully. Again, so much intense shine on this background. And I love that beautiful color blend we were able to create using the scraper and finishing it off with that really nice bold flower from the Sentimental flower stamp set. I haven't used that set in a little while, but the flowers in there are just gorgeous. All right, lastly, I want to show you how to use this really beautiful piece that we swiped off. So I can show you how to use those excess pieces and turn them into really beautiful cards. So with this one, I'm going to sort of play into the rainbow shape and really make this background be the focal point. And what's better than some gorgeous butterflies fluttering through a little rainbow? So I thought I would use these butterflies. Let me do one of the smallest ones, and then let me do this one too, kind of a medium-sized one. I love that you get so many different size options from really large to really small, so you have lots of options when you're creating. And to contrast from the background, I'm going to use a piece of my stark white cardstock, lay the butterflies down, and we'll run them right through our die cutting machine. And since they have lots of little detail, I've run them back through too to make sure they're all perfectly cut out. And since these guys have so many little detailed pieces, I found this 2-in-1 tool to be super helpful. I take this sort of pokey end and just roll it across the surface of those butterflies. And then there's also these little tiny pieces. That's where this pokey tool comes in handy so we can poke them right out. And to adhere these guys down, I'll go in with a little bit of liquid glue right in the center and just place them right down on the surface. And I like to just adhere the center because then the wings stay kind of flapped up and add tons of dimension to the card. Angling them to make them look like they're flying and adhering them down. To finish this off, we'll go into the Butterfly Kisses stamp set and use the Spread Your Wings and Fly sentiment. I love that one because it's super encouraging. So we're gonna do a little bit of heat embossing for this on black cardstock. So again, with the anti-static powder tool to make sure nothing sticks where we don't want it to. And then I'll use my clear sticky Versamark ink and stamp this right down onto the surface of our cardstock. Then I'll throw over a layer of white heat embossing powder, tap off the excess, and then blow any of the strayaways. And we'll heat set this until it's nice and bright white. And there's a closer look at my card. I just love the shiny rainbow background, how we kind of changed direction with our tool to create that really fun swipe pattern. And it turned into such a gorgeous card from just being a swipe off scrap. I love the Brilliant Butterflies dies too. I've used these so much. It really proves that it can make really quick and simple cards that are super beautiful. Alright you guys, I hope you really enjoyed today's video, taking a closer look at the paste tool set and how to apply it in several beautiful ways using Lunar paste. If you enjoyed the video, please give it a big thumbs up and leave a comment down below letting me know which card was your favorite. Also down there is a full supplies list to everything I used, and using those links helps support me, so I really appreciate it. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys soon. Have a great day. Bye!